You might think you're insecure in your relationships because there's something wrong with you, but there isn't. It's just not true. You're insecure in your relationships because you never learned 3 core skills. Skills that literally shape the way you see and experience yourself. And because you don't have these skills yet, your own mind, emotions, and actions feel like they're against you. It can be very easy to want to reject them, to think they're bad. But what if I told you that they're not your enemies? They're just parts of yourselves that haven't yet been trained. That's exactly what I'm going to help you see and understand in this video. And then I'm actually going to give you those skills and teach you how to learn them. Before we go into this, I need to say to you though that this video and all the videos on my channel are made for a very specific and special type of person. And if you're not this type of person, you can still gain some things from it, but you won't truly feel seen, heard, understood, and make the kind of progress that you really want to make. If you are the special type of person, however, I'm going to help you change your entire life, both in life in general and your relationships. So how do you know if you're that special type of person? Number 1, when you face certain type of situations, you're going to have some very negative and scary thoughts come up, and you're not going to know how to deal with them. And even if you think you've dealt with them, they still kind of linger and stay there. Number 2, those thoughts might bring up really difficult and overwhelming emotions. Again, something you really struggle to deal with or handle. Number 3, when those emotions and those feelings combine, it sends you into the state of panic, of instinctive reactionary mode or being, and you will do things that aren't necessarily healthy, that you look back on and wonder why you did it. Things that usually cause negative outcomes either in your life in general or in your relationships. And number 4, probably the most important thing, you have some level of awareness of all of this. You know your thoughts can be scary and overwhelming and you don't know how to deal with them. You know your emotions can send you into these spirals and that you want to be able to control them. And you know that your actions cause unhealthy or bad or negative outcomes, and you wish that you didn't act in those ways. You know that all of those things are not who you really are, not who you really want to be. You might not have the language or the wording for it right now, but you just know it's not you, and you want to do things differently. You just don't know how yet. If that is you, if you said yes to those questions, the reason why you're special, among many other things, I'm sure, but the reason why you're special is because you are me and I am you. I'm just a few years into the future. I struggle with the exact same things, both in life and relationships. And I want to help you get to where I've gotten to, learn what I've learned, implement the skills that I've been able to implement, change my life in the way I have, but in a much shorter time. I want to help you move towards becoming your truest, most authentic, confident, and secure self. So, if that is you and that resonated or hit on any level, I invite you to subscribe to my channel. Not because of metrics or anything like that, but because every single video from now on is going to help you in some way or another get to that end goal. Okay, that being said, let's get into the actual video. So something really important to understand for this video is the definition of insecurity. The definition of insecurity is to be uncertain or anxious about yourself. To be uncertain or anxious about yourself. If you have that, that means you're insecure. Now, little side note on this, people very often think insecurity has a really negative connotation and that it's a really deep thing all the time. You can be insecure about anything. If you start a new hobby or skill, You are technically insecure in the beginning of that hobby or skill because you don't know how to do it, and therefore you are uncertain or anxious about your abilities in that skill. Right? Okay. Now, why this is so important to understand this definition is because we have 3 fundamental skills or parts of being human. And those 3 fundamental parts or skills are your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions. Right? Every human being has those. Therefore, they are fundamental parts of themselves. Here's where it becomes very important. When you are insecure, you will doubt your thoughts. You will be overwhelmed and controlled by your emotions. And your actions will be manipulated or controlled by those emotions and thoughts. When that happens, you will view your emotions, your thoughts, and your actions as something bad, as something negative, as something to be rejected. And this is what feeds the cycle of insecurity, because if those fundamental parts of you, if you have doubt in them or worry about them or uncertainty about them and your ability to handle them, you therefore have uncertainty about fundamental parts of who you are, and therefore uncertainty about yourself. And if you remember that definition, that is the definition of insecurity, to be uncertain or anxious about yourself. Now, I just wanted to throw that out there to plant the seed, but I'm going to show you how this actually works. So, if we were to use a very common insecurity cycle in relationships, we can use the cycle of a late reply. Right? So, I don't know, you really like somebody or you're in a relationship with somebody and all of a sudden they've taken like 2-3 hours to reply, and you start getting a bit anxious. You start having these really difficult thoughts. You might even, because of that, start responding to that situation in a kind of needy, clingy, unhealthy way, right? So let me show you what I mean. If we were to use those 3 core skills or parts of being a human, like I said before, the first one would be our thought. Now, let me ask you, in the example of getting a late reply, maybe you've had this experience before. What is your first thought? What usually is somebody's first thought, especially when they're in a space of insecurity, is they don't want to reply to me. They're with someone else. They don't care as much as I do. All these very negative, difficult thoughts, right? Now, we might try and argue those thoughts. We might be like, no, that's not true. That's not the case. And sometimes they might even completely spiral and send us into these depths of despair and worry and fear. Either way, that thought and our inability to handle that thought, to reframe it, to create something more positive around it, causes really big issues for us. And if it causes those issues, we start to doubt our thoughts. Why do I think this way? What's wrong with me? Why does my mind always do this? Right? So already you can see that's something that is adding to our own despair, and therefore we doubt our thoughts. What's wrong with me? Why do I do this? Why does my mind screw me over like this? We're doubting a fundamental part of who we are, thoughts, thinking. There's nothing wrong with thoughts on their own, but if we don't have the ability to handle them or control them, that's when we can view them as something really bad and negative. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, I'll put it down here, are our emotions. Once again, every human being, unless they genuinely have some type of psychological disorder, has emotions. When we're in a space of insecurity, or we are insecure as a person, our emotions can be really overwhelming. Fear, panic, worry, doubt, jealousy, anger. And if we don't have the ability to handle those emotions, to control them, to regulate them, to calm them, then they're going to completely take us over. And emotions are much more of like a physiological thing too. We can feel it more. So a lot of people's awareness around not sort of showing up in the way they want to come through emotions. Even if they're not exactly aware of the thoughts they're having, or even the actions they're sort of doing, they will definitely become aware of their emotions because they know what that feels like. And that's what they usually are like. Why do I feel this way? Why am I so anxious all the time? Why, when my partner is like looking at somebody else, I get this like pit in my stomach, right? So in the example that we were using, late reply, the thought, they're with someone else, right? They don't care as much as I do. They're not interested in me anymore. The emotions that would come with that is going to be something like anxiety, worry, doubt, fear. And then the physiological feeling will be like a pit in the stomach, maybe like a tight chest, something like that. Now, again, as I said, if we don't have the ability to calm that, we're going to start to see our emotions, having emotions, or just emotions in general as something bad. We're going to be, again, rejecting or being uncertain about a fundamental part of who we are as a human. And to bring it back to that original definition, if we are uncertain about ourselves or our ability in a fundamental part of who we are, that is going to continue a cycle of insecurity. That is the definition of insecurity. So again, we can put a cross there. Okay. Number 3, just want to make sure you can see this on the camera, are our actions. Now the actions part is really, really important, because even if you can't control your thoughts or your emotions, but you just at least respond to the situation in a healthy way, there's going to be less of, the common sabotaging of relationships. That being said, we want to work on all 3. But what happens is when our thoughts and our emotions combine and we haven't dealt with either of them, what happens, so let me actually put these together here. When these two things combine, what happens is they start to create like this tornado inside of us. And it sends us into this panic mode, into this absolute fear space. Now, what this is called within psychology is fight or flight mode. And what's happening on a physiological level is our nervous system is being dysregulated. So we're going into this almost caveman instinctive space. We are perceiving there to be a threat. The thought of, coming back to the example, the thought of them not caring about us or them being with somebody else, and then the emotions that come from that thought, they combine and we start to believe it to be true. Even if we don't have any evidence or proof to it, we believe it to be true, and therefore we go into this sort of, there's a threat, I need to respond to this threat mode. Instinctive, caveman-like basically, fight or flight mode, because our nervous system is being dysregulated. And that's where the actions come in. Our actions, which are usually, by the way, unhealthy when we are insecure, are based off of this threat that we are believing to now be true, even if it's not. And the way I can almost prove this is whatever thought you might have, the action is going to be very similarly based on that thought. So for example, using the example I used before, if the thought is they haven't replied late, they're with someone else, brings up fear, maybe even anger, depending on your attachment style. Attachment styles is something we'll go into in another video. It's basically just the different types of behaviors that will come up depending on what type of insecurity you have, anxious or avoidant or disorganized, so on and so forth. Don't worry about that. You don't need to know about that now. But the response will be unhealthy and based on the thought 90-something% of the time. So for example, partner hasn't texted back, they're with someone else, anger, worry, fear, jealousy sends us into this panic mode, this spiral. We now react to that instinctively. What will usually happen in that example is we will text our partner and be like, are you with somebody else? Who are you with? Why are you not replying? That's if it's coming from that anger space. If it's coming from that fear, it's like, are you with somebody else? Do you not love me anymore? So on and so forth. Now, again, once we have calmed down from that, we might look back at our actions and be like, why did I do that? That was so lame, so clingy, so needy, so insecure. What's wrong with me? Why do I act this way all the time? Once again, reinforcing the cycle of insecurity. If we are doubting our own actions, if we're uncertain about ourselves and how we act in the world, we are therefore uncertain about a fundamental part of who we are, and therefore insecure. Definition of insecurity. Okay. So, and I'm gonna show you this in another way, real quick. Just a more direct graph, if you want to call it that. So as I said, we have our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions. Now, funny enough, the thumbnail of this video was the sentence, "What's wrong with me?" Now, another version of that is, there is something wrong with me, or I'm not good enough, or I'm broken, or I'm just fundamentally flawed. I'd like to introduce you to another part of this, which is each of those things I just mentioned are a core belief somebody who is insecure will have. And as I said before, each of these things, when we are doing them in an unhealthy way and don't have the skills to do them in a healthy way, we start to doubt them and therefore ourselves. So when we can't handle our thoughts and they spiral, they reinforce this negative belief of, I'm broken, or there's something wrong with me. When we can't handle our emotions that come up and they overwhelm us, we don't know how to calm them. They reinforce the belief that there's something wrong with me. When we act in these unhealthy ways and push our partners away or hurt them or anything that basically we don't enjoy or feel like is our true self, we reinforce the idea there's something wrong with me, that I'm broken. And that's another reason why each of these things, not having the skills in these areas, are reinforcing the cycle of insecurity. You are doubting fundamental parts of who you are. You are uncertain about fundamental parts of who you are, and therefore reinforcing a belief inside of you that is the definition of insecurity. I'm broken. There's something wrong with me. That is uncertainty in yourself. Okay. Makes sense. So let's move on. We're going to get to the solutions now. And this is really, really important. This is how we break the cycle of insecurity. These three fundamental core skills are the foundation of coming out of insecurity in relationships, but also in life in general. So just to show you that cycle again, thoughts, emotions, actions, beliefs. And each of these things lead on to the next and go into each other and create a cycle of insecurity. Now, something I forgot to mention here is that our beliefs then actually cause our thoughts. Now, this is a sort of higher end topic that I'll go into in another video. But for now, just trust me, I guess. Our thoughts create our emotions or cause our emotions. Our emotions cause our actions, or the combination of these two cause our actions. And our actions, which has a result of a negative outcome, will then reinforce whatever the core belief is, which then continues the cycle. So when we don't handle our thoughts, and therefore they cause these really difficult emotions, when we don't handle our emotions, and therefore they cause these really difficult spiral inside of us, which then sends us into the action space. And when we don't respond in a healthy way, and therefore cause negative outcomes in our relationships, it creates and causes and reinforces the belief that there's something wrong with us, that we're just broken. So, solution time. We want to basically work on 3 fundamental parts to this cycle, to break this cycle. The first one is the thoughts. And the word I like to use for this, or the sort of caption, if you want to call it that, is mental arguing, cognitive arguing, mental reframe, whatever. We want to be able to be in control of our thoughts. We want to take control or take back control of our mind. So there's a lot of different things that go into this. I'll write a couple down. So a couple of the skills that go into this are, for example, grounding techniques. And what grounding techniques basically do, I'm gonna run through a couple of these, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a link in the description of this video where I've basically created free guides on each of these 3 fundamental skills that'll help you, give you an understanding of what they are, why they are beneficial, and then it'll give you some examples for you to go and research and practice. So grounding techniques basically pull you away from your mind because your thoughts might be trying to lead you astray. And when you pull away from the thoughts, you have better clarity, you have better perception of the truth or reality of the situation. Something else that's really important is something like meditation. Meditation, and this has literally been studied, shuts down parts of the brain that shuts down or quietens parts of the brain that are responsible for thinking, responsible for perception, so on and so forth. So I'm just going to give you a couple of each. But the main point of this is we want to be able to find the truth of the situation. We don't want to be controlled by these thoughts that may not be true at all, that may be irrational, that there isn't actually proof around it. So we want to get very clear on what's actually happening in the situation and not be controlled by our thoughts. So number 2 are our emotions. And the main solution for emotions is emotional regulation, right? In other words, we have the ability to calm our emotions. Now, okay, a couple examples. Deep breathing techniques. And just to prove to you that, again, I'm you from the future and I've been through this and breathing techniques works. I don't know if you'll be able to see this. Yeah, okay. It was one of the first tools I learned when trying to work on my insecurities. And it worked so well that I tattooed it on my hand. I've got a lot of tattoos, but it was a good reminder for me. The breathing techniques basically work directly with the nervous system. And it works to basically calm your nervous system down. It sends signals up to your brain that you're safe, that you're okay, activates your parasympathetic nervous system, and brings you back to a place of calm. It's a skill, so it'll take some practice and everything, but it works. Another one, and this is going into much sort of deeper techniques that I teach my clients in my one-on-one coaching, for example, but something like self-reassurance technique. This is a technique where you can basically reparent yourself. You can go deep into where this emotion comes from. And when you go deep into where it comes from, you can also work with that in the space that it's from and bring about some more positive, calming emotions. And when you do that, you basically teach yourself that whatever that trigger is, that emotional response is and what it's about, you can shift it to a much healthier, calm space. And actually with that one specifically, over time, you do that enough, you won't even have the reaction towards whatever situation is triggering you. So really powerful one. But the point of this is that we don't want our emotions to completely take over us and control us. We want to be able to calm it down so we can come from a place of calm, clarity, and neutrality, if you want to call it that. So that we're not in that flight or fight space. We're in a logical, rational, calm, collected space so we can deal with the situation properly. Now, why this is really important, when we can pull away from thoughts and when we can calm our emotions, what we do is we create a gap, we create an opportunity that I like to call the golden opportunity. And what this opportunity or gap is a moment in time in between the situation and you being emotionally triggered and then your reaction to that emotional trigger. So if I were to use an example, here's the situation, a late reply. Usually what happens is, and let me use a different color. Usually what happens is almost immediately there is the unhealthy reaction. So for example, to bring it back to the example we used before, it's been 2 hours, all of a sudden we notice our partner hasn't responded in a while. The thought comes up, the emotion comes up, the reaction is almost immediate. Whether we sit there and like spiral, or whether we text them like 10 times, or whether we ask them the really needy, clingy question of like, you know, are you with somebody else? Do you not love me anymore? Etc., etc. Usually the gap between those two situations, the trigger and the reaction, very, very small, if none at all. What the golden opportunity is us basically using these two tools to create some space between that situation and the trigger and our response. So therefore our response comes later. And the beautiful thing about this, the really important thing, is what we get to do in that space is we get to fall back on another important skill that we've learned, which is healthy responses, healthy and confident responses. So some examples of that would be healthy communication, which is a very important skill, which could also be boundary setting, or one more just so that you understand it better. It could also be, as I spoke about earlier, self-reassurance technique. Because sometimes we don't have to necessarily respond to a situation. We just have to understand it better within ourselves. And then we don't even feel the need to respond to the situation. But regardless, these are a few of the very important ways of healthily responding to situations. Now, as I was saying, when we have these skills learned, it becomes much easier then to fall back on them and use that as our response instead of an unhealthy reaction. So instead of this like instinctive, oh my gosh, I'm having the thought that my partner is with somebody else, instead of that instinctive fear-based, are you with somebody else? Do you not love me anymore? Did I do something wrong? Whatever it is, we're now basing our response on a much healthy, pre-learned skill. This doesn't mean you're inauthentic, by the way. You're still speaking your truth. You're still speaking what you think and feel. You're just doing it in a much healthier way. For example, if we used the same example before and they took long to respond and our thought is, I'm worried they're with somebody else, right? They're out cheating or something. What you could then do instead of that immediate reaction of like, are you with somebody else? You could have a very calm, cool, collected response of like, hey, I noticed we haven't been speaking in a long time. I want to check in with you because it makes me a little bit worried or fearful. I know that You might be busy or whatever it is. I just want to check in, and these thoughts are mine and mine alone. Why has it taken so long? Are you busy just looking for some clarity, whatever? Now, that was a very sort of off the top of the dome kind of response, but there are a lot of different components that go into healthy communication. So just to give you an example. Now, the really important part of this, and I want you to really think about this as I bring this up, as I explain this. When you are able to control your thoughts, or at the very least, not let your thoughts control you, right? So you're either not even having the thoughts anymore. Maybe the thoughts are coming, but you know how to deal with them. You know how to handle them, put them aside, or do whatever you need to do with them. When you are not letting your emotions control you, you know how to regulate them, to calm them so that they don't like take you over. And then most importantly, when you're responding in a healthy, confident way, ask yourself, how would you feel? My guess is you would feel a whole lot more confident in yourself. You would feel better about your thoughts, and you would stop viewing your thoughts as something so bad or terrible, right? Thinking is something you have to do all the time. Well, you don't have to. Later on, you kind of want to work away from that, but you won't view something that's fundamentally part of you as something terrible or bad anymore. If you're able to calm your emotions, same thing. You will see emotions for what they really are, just a guidance system that you know how to navigate now, that you know how to calm down when it's pointing you in the wrong direction. You will see your actions as something good, healthy, confident. And therefore, you will be seeing fundamental parts of who you are as better, as good, maybe even as like great. But most importantly, you will have more confidence in yourself. You will see yourself as more capable, able. You will no longer see yourself as not good enough, as just broken, as fundamentally flawed. You will realize that you can actually learn things to become a better version of yourself. You will be able to see with tangible evidence when you practice these skills that you are capable of controlling your thoughts, of mastering your emotions, of responding in a healthy and confident way. And therefore you will see yourself as able, capable, good enough, not broken. Okay. So just to show you that in a sort of picture way, all of a sudden this belief of I'm broken, I'm not capable, I am fundamentally flawed, I'm not good enough, that will change. That will shift because you will be responding healthily, you will be controlling your emotions, and you will be controlling your thoughts, and therefore you will see that you are capable and that you are good enough. Okay. I've done this. This is why I know this stuff. I've walked this path, and I know you are able and capable too. This is like probably one of the first steps on this journey. And this is why I so desperately want you to know it. And this is also why, by the way, again, I think I mentioned this, but I've made free guides on this. These are fundamental skills I want you to learn, that I believe you should learn, so that you can become a better version of yourself. You can rediscover who you really are. You can start to have faith and belief in yourself. It's really, really important on this journey. So I want to invite you as your, let's say, first piece of homework. Go get those free guides. Go start implementing, researching them, going into depth in them and practicing them. And just see within the next 3-4 weeks maximum how certain things will start to change in your life, how your responses will change, how your internal sense of being will change. And most importantly, how your sense of self, how you see yourself will change. And you will start to believe that there is hope, that you can work towards something better, that you can become that better, truer version of yourself. It's possible. I know it is. I'm not special. As I said, I'm you, just from the future. Okay. Just trying to see if there's anything else that I needed to put in here. That's all I have for today. If you have any questions, thoughts, or feelings on this, feel free to drop them in the comments. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video. Keep growing.